Hi everyone, welcome to this quick input on tissue. Tissue is a poem that a lot of people say is quite hard because it's deliberately ambiguous. That means it deliberately doesn't give you an answer and makes you think of your own answer and what you're going to do, which is a strength of the poem, but can make it tricky when you're writing under timed conditions in a test or something. So let's get on quickly. We're just going to look at some of the main ideas which will help you, and then you can do more research and dig deeper after that. So, Tissue is a poem by Dharker. And when you're writing about it, call her by her last name, say Dharker, because that's how you write about poets and authors. She was born in Pakistan and she moved to Glasgow as a child. So a lot of her poems and a lot of her writing is about having two cultures and growing up between those cultures, negotiating the similarities and differences. There's a BBC video where she says why she wrote the poem. I will link to that when I put this up on YouTube. And it's about what matters, what's worth writing in books: birth, death, family, and relationships. So she saw her dad had written her date of birth in a book, and she mentions this in the poem. And it made her feel close to him, and it made her think about what matters and what's worth writing down and what's worth thinking about when you write it down, and what kind of money we spend a lot of time chasing but isn't really worth going after. So let's go into the poem. So you should have your anthology and read along. Please pause this and read it through once, or watch the video in the link before coming back to the annotation. Okay, so first stanza. Paper that lets the light shine through. This is what could alter things. Paper thinned by age or touching. So the first thing you notice, the first word is paper, reference to tissue, but remember tissue also means living tissue that we're made of. And she says paper that lets the light shine through. So the paper has some power here. The paper is what allows the light to shine through. What does light represent? It represents things like religion, new ideas, like in cartoons the light bulb comes on above someone's head when they have an idea. Life and a new day, enlightenment, open-mindedness, that kind of thing. Now, if you want to go for more than one interpretation, it can mean several of those things at the same time. But not all paper can do this. Only paper that lets the light shine through can alter things. So paper that lets the light shine through, this is what could alter things. That suggests the other extreme is that there is some paper that doesn't alter things. Yeah, and we'll come to that later. But paper that lets ideas, beliefs, family values, relationships shine through, it enriches our lives. Paper thinned by age or touching. So she's talking about culture here, about family, about heritage, not paper you throw away. Like that book that her dad writes the dates of birth of his children in and has carried from Pakistan to Glasgow. That's important. He's carried it to a new country when he emigrated. These are things that they last a long time and they're appreciated by many people. And you've also got this link between skin and paper, which comes up a lot. The kind you find in well-used books, the back of the Quran, where a hand has written in the names and histories, whom was born to whom. So there's enjambment between each stanza to hint at this passing of time, this family, generation after generation. She also mentions her religious text. So she is Muslim, so she talks about the Quran. It's like her family Quran. Someone's written in the family details. She saw her own date of birth. It also links back to light. So there's a quote here from the Quran about light. And if you look in the Bible and you look at other religious books, there's lots of quotes about light being a positive thing. So this is universal. She uses the Quran because she is Muslim, but it applies to anyone who's got a strong sense of their heritage, a strong sense of their background, their religion, their traditions, their family values. Or, even if you're an atheist, but you open up an old family Bible and you see your ancestors, yeah? And it's your history, it's your family. Remember, for context, she said family is important. And she uses that word, a hand. It could be anyone, any generation, yeah? It's universal. It's like humankind, a hand. Her dad wrote her date of birth. His father or his mother wrote his date of birth. His grandfather or his grandmother wrote the grandfather or grandmother, and so on, back in time. It's about history, it's about family heritage, it's not one person. And religion is a part of that, because that's kind of cultural history, and it's belief, and it links to light. It's about having a value that isn't to do with how many likes you get on Instagram. Yeah, it's about a deeper value. She's writing about the Quran because she is Muslim, but if you are watching this and you are of a Christian heritage or a Jewish heritage or a Hindu heritage, you could be thinking about your own culture. Yeah, what she's actually talking about is that culture and family goes back and back. The height and weight, who died where and how, on what sepia date, pages smoothed and stroked and turned transparent with attention. So she's looking at this book. The height and weight is about babies. You know, people will always say, how much does the baby weigh? And it's a nice family thing, again, about family and history and heritage and DNA, because your height and weight is related to your size of your family. You know, there are taller families, there are shorter families. It's all to do with who you are. And this book and your culture is linked to who you are and your family. And that's what she's talking about. What's worth writing down is your family values. Why is the paper smooth and stroked? What do the sibilance verbs suggest? Well, to me, that's very smooth and kind and gentle. It's calm. It's thoughtful, smooth and stroked. Stroked is affectionate. People will love their family. But equally, people will love their heritage. They might not notice it. They might have a book that's very precious because it's got all their family written down. You might have in the back like a wedding photo or something tucked in safe. It's like it's kind of sentimental value, family heirlooms. More important than money might be this book. And also you've got the double meaning of see-through, transparent. It also means honest and open. You know, being honest about who you are, not covering up your heritage. A bit of vocabulary. The word sepia means, you know, those very old photos and they're kind of orangey coloured. So again, that's that idea of history. If buildings were paper, I might feel their drift, see how easily they fall away on a sigh, a shift in the direction of the wind. So there's a Volta here. This stanza starts talking about the weakness of paper. And here she's talking about paper linked with buildings. Buildings we normally think are strong, but we're also thinking about this idea. Later she talks about monoliths, about powerful people who build buildings to show how rich they are, like Trump Tower, like Ozymandias, you know, in the other poems. So that'd be a good comparison. And she talks about how that kind of power and that kind of design of a building might not last as long as you think. And she uses that drift and shift, that internal rhyme to show that human power doesn't last. Nature and things like culture and things like values last a lot longer than buildings. Yeah? Even within our generations, politics shifts. So we're seeing big shifts in politics at the moment with Black Lives Matter, with the Me Too movement and things like that. You know, times change. And she's saying, you build this big tower, it might not last as long as you think. And there's a good quote to compare with it if you had to do that in a lesson or test. Maps 2. The sun shines through their borderlines, the marks that rivers make, roads, rail tracks, mountain folds. So here, it's another thing that humans do to do with power, but this time governments. You know, like Trump says, we're going to build a wall between the USA and Mexico. You know, like how in Wales, Scotland and England, there's a border dotted line. And sometimes that dotted line goes through the middle of a town. And half the town could open their shops on one day after lockdown and the other half on another day. That maps that are man-made, you know, you don't walk up to Scotland and as you cross the border, there's a dotted line on the floor. That's not what happens. These man-made maps, we think they've got a lot of power, but they're not from nature and they change over time. Light, sun and nature breaks through these human-made divisions. An example that links a bit to Animal Farm, for example, is the USSR that once had huge power doesn't exist anymore. It's now several different countries. An example is that England colonized and took over a lot of countries in the past, and those countries gained their independence in the 20th century. And so those maps, and that was to do with power and taking over and war, that was all scrapped. The shape of the country, the physical geography didn't change, but the man-made geography did. So again, it's about power not lasting, and that power being knocked down by enlightenment, light, and progress. And you've got that enjambment through the whole poem, which still says nature isn't bothered with human power, and history isn't bothered with one person's human power. Bigger, positive ideas shape history. Enlightenment shapes history. Values shape history, not chasing after money, which takes us on to the next slide. Find slips from grocery shops that say how much was sold and what was paid by credit card might fly our lives like paper kites. And again, that simile there is saying, what flies your life? Is it money? Is it chasing the next pound? Or is it something more significant? What paper are you touching and stroking? Is it the paper that builds strong values, strong history, strong family, or is it just chasing money? Of course, it's not always our fault that the paper flies our lives. We can't escape money. We need it to live. But she's talking about how much power you give it. An architect could use all this, place layer over layer, luminous script over numbers over line, and never wish to build again with brick. So, the architect, who is it? Is it God? Is it nature? Is it you? Who is building something that's amazing out of paper? Paper being what you write on. Or block, but let the daylight through capitals and monoliths, through the shapes that pride can make. Find a way to trace the grand design. So it doesn't say what the grand design is, but it's better than capitals and monoliths. Those are like great big stone buildings, like Ozymandias, yeah? Like Trump Tower. She's kind of saying there's a better way to live. There's a better way to let enlightenment through. If you get power, use your power wisely. If you want to annotate, obviously, anytime you can pause this video. I'm just kind of talking through it. But she constantly talks about light, which is God, nature, and particularly if you don't believe in God, things like enlightenment, ideas, values, being more powerful than just these big structures like maps, monoliths, buildings. Yeah, you can build a grander design than that with living tissue. So that's what builds your living tissue. Here she makes it clear. You can build something more powerful than Ozymandias' statue. Raise a structure never meant to last, of paper smooth and stroked and thin to be transparent. So here she makes it clear. Live your life. You're not meant to live forever, but do something good with your life rather than, chasing money and chasing to have a big building. Be written down somewhere in a book that people will touch that book when it is smoothed and stroked and thinned, which is linked to further back in the poem structurally. Yeah? Do something that people read about in future. Here, she becomes less ambiguous. She's challenging you. She's saying, raise a structure. You're yourself. You're only going to be alive maximum about 100 years. Do something. Use the fact that you're not permanent to do something. And then on its own, it says turned into your skin. And that word you, second person, you do something. She's like pointing at you. You write your story. You do something that is valuable based on values. Are you going to chase Instagram likes and money? Or are you going to base it on improving your life of your family? Or changing politics to move away from something you think is evil? Is what you do going to be written down and remembered by future generations? And down the bottom, there are a few alternatives. Which one do you agree with most? Maybe all three. That's fine. I'm just going to pause there. You can annotate that and then go on to a final summary. What lasts? So really, as a summing up, as a takeaway, she's talking about beliefs, learning, values, and language. These last a lot longer than individual buildings or riches. For thousands of years, there aren't many buildings from the time that our religion started, but these religions still influence many people. There are, Einstein didn't build a building, but he influenced the way we think. So that's the key message behind this poem. So go back, pause, annotate. I hope it helped. Do send me any questions, and I'm going to get my colleagues to make some more of these and we'll upload them, and I'll make a few more. So good luck. I hope it's helpful. Don't forget to like and subscribe.